All right, hello beautiful creators. Welcome to part 2, finishing off this beautiful paradise waterfall. Before we start, I just want to give you a heads up that we live across from a big beautiful water park and there are kids over there having an amazing time. So if you hear any kids screaming in the background, that's what it is. I love living here because we can just hear kids playing all the time. It's amazing. All right, so let's begin this beautiful painting. So taking a moment to yourself before starting to set up your creation bubble, look into your flame, reconnect with your intention that you have already started pouring into this painting, and bringing that intention up through the center line of your body into your heart, expanding it as big as you can until it washes down your arms into your hands. And let's begin. So we're gonna start with some Hooker's Green. All of my colors are running together. And right above this video is a list of all of the colors that we're gonna use in this painting today. So starting off with your dark green, and just begin mapping out some little bushes right across the top of your waterfall. There we go. And so I'm using a 1-inch flat top brush, and I'll probably use this same brush the entire painting. So just to show you, 1-inch flat top brush. And just putting in some beautiful trees here. I'm just using dark green for now. And then you can bring in a little bit of ultramarine blue to start darkening up kind of right on top of where the rocks are going to be. So lighter at the top and darker closer to the rocks. So bringing in a little more green and blue, we're going to start mapping out some trees down here too. And I'm going right over top of the texture. So our first layer was really thin, with really watered down paint, and now we're just going to start loading up some layers of paint here. And anywhere you think some little bushes would go. Remembering there's no right, no wrong. This is going to look so beautiful no matter what. I'm just going right over top of the texture. And there we go. We're gonna leave that for now. And I'm not even gonna clean my brush. I'm gonna grab some gray and some burnt umber and just mix it right into the green that I already have in my brush, and maybe a little more gray. And I'm gonna go right over top of all of the areas that are going to be rock. So anywhere that you put big chunks of texture to be the rock in your painting, you can just go right over top. And actually I'm gonna lighten this up just a smidge, taking a little bit of white and mixing it in. There we go. I'm going right over top of anywhere that you have these rocks. I'm adding a little more up here. And adding in a little more gray, and you can add some green into your gray. It will give it kind of this mossy look. I just love that, seeing rocks covered in moss. So beautiful. And then once you've covered all of your texture, you can just take your brush and begin to drag down. So anywhere that you have these rocks, we're gonna create kind of a misty, foggy look down at the bottom of the falls. So beginning to just drag down underneath where the rocks are. And so at this point, I'm gonna get my brush wet. I'm actually gonna kind of clean it off a little bit. And nice wet brush, I'm going to connect to the top of where the paint ended on the rocks and just pull it straight down. And it's okay if you go right over top of where your waterfall is going to go, just to blend the rocks right in. There we go. And so now the rocks down at the bottom here, we're gonna make it look more like a shoreline. So I'm gonna take some burnt umber, some brown, and my brush is still a bit wet, so it's making the color show up a little bit lighter, and a tiny bit of raw sienna. And just covering these rocks. And if you need to put in some more paint, that's totally cool. And then I'm also going to carry this color over to these rocks here, so there's more cohesive blending between the gray that's more in the background and the lighter brown that's more in the foreground. So this is going to give us the illusion of distance, having warmer colors and brighter colors in the foreground and more muted gray colors in the background. And then here, let's get a tiny bit of white. I'm just putting a very small amount of white on my brush, and I'm going to go right at the edge of the shoreline here to begin to blend the browns. Okay, so I'm going to clean my brush, and we are going to bring in some white. So cleaning your brush and then also drying it. We're going to take a little bit of white, and right here at the very bottom of the waterfall, we're going to start to map in a little bit of mist. So doing the same kind of dabbing, and then into the water you can just go back and forth, horizontal, and then kind of dab upwards. This is going to begin our illusion of mist rising from the falls. Beautiful. So now I'm going to take a little bit of gold onto my brush, and I'm going to go right over top of the texture that's still up here. So this is still the background, the first layer of our painting showing through at the top here. We're going to cover that up with white and a little bit of gold to bring in some warmth. If you want to warm up your white, you can also add in a tiny bit of raw sienna. I just love to use gold whenever possible, which is always. We're just mapping in all of the color. So my trees are beginning to dry. They're still a bit wet, but I'm going to bring the white down into the green. So it's going to begin blending, and I'm still just using the same dabbing, just dabbing the brush. And I'm starting to bring it down right over top of the trees. So we're gonna wait until all of the texture is dry. So everywhere that you put paint on top of the texture, we wanna wait till this portion is dry before going over top of it. So let's work on the water. So taking your same brush, I've dried my 1-inch flat top brush and washed it and dried it. And I'm gonna take some ultramarine blue and just kind of work it into the tip of the brush. And I'm going to go along the very bottom of where the rocks are. So I'm going to put on quite a bit of paint. And it's okay if you get some on the rocks, you can always just go over them afterwards. I'm going to bring it right across, so imagining a nice straight line right across where your falls are. And bringing in some more ultramarine blue. I'm putting in quite a bit of paint here to start layering it up. Beautiful. And if you have a lot of paint left on your brush like I do, you can just wash it off. And then we're going to take some of this beautiful bright aqua green, loading up your brush and going right underneath your ultramarine blue, and then adding a little bit more, and we're going to start blending upwards. So covering right underneath the ultramarine blue first, and then begin to blend it upwards by just doing horizontal brush strokes back and forth. And we're not going to blend it too much. We're going to leave it just like this. It's very easy, very quick, very subtle. And then adding in some more bright aqua green at the bottom. So if you've got some ultramarine blue on your brush, you can just quickly wash it off, so that the very bottom portion here is going to be really bright aqua green. Beautiful. And then we're going to take a tiny bit of white, mix it into your brush here, and go right along the edge of your shoreline. I just love this part when you are standing at the edge of a river or a lake and you can look through the water and it's crystal clear and you can see all of the rocks underneath. It's so beautiful, and that's kind of the feeling that I'm going for here. So making it a little bit lighter by adding some white right across the top of this beach area. There we go. I'm going to take a little more bright aqua green and just put a tiny bit up into the water here, so that when we put the white over top of our waterfall, we'll have a tiny little bit of bright aqua green showing through. So cleaning off your brush, we're going to begin putting in our beautiful waterfalls. So nice, clean, dry brush, take a little bit of white and work it into your brush. And this is actually going to be a little bit easier if you have a flat top brush. You're going to connect your brush to the top of where your waterfall is, and then just pull straight down. And then anywhere where there will be like a little tiny trickle of water, it hits here and then rolls right off. It just comes right through here. And I'm going to put a little more white on my brush and then just bring in a little more light color down here, and very gently just begin to dab the paintbrush upwards. And as you get closer, as you move your paintbrush upwards, dab even lighter. So this starts to begin to blend this mist upwards. And we're gonna go over this part again. So just doing the best that you can right here to lighten up this area where the waterfall is hitting the water. And so if you are using a large canvas, this one's really small, but if you're going big, you can also use the same scrubbing technique that I keep talking about and just very gently scrub upwards. This is usually how I create a misty look, but because this canvas is so small, the dabbing is kind of working a little bit better. But you can also just do the same thing by scrubbing your brush upwards if you have a larger canvas. So here you have two options. You can put your canvas out in the sun to dry, or you can just wait till this layer is dry before moving on. I'm almost dry, so I'm just gonna keep going. So I'm gonna take a nice clean dry brush, the same brush, and I'm going to go back over top of my trees. One thing with this Hooker's green is it needs to be in layers. It's a really transparent color. So I'm just going to do the same thing and dab the brush to redefine these trees. And you can also add in a little bit of ultramarine blue to make this really beautiful dark turquoise color to bring some shadows in here. And then you can look at the top of your waterfall and see if you need to bring the trees down anywhere so that the top of your waterfall is a little more flat. I mean, there really are no rules with water. And then also bringing your green, and if you want to darken it to add some blue into it, all down here if you want to add any bushes on top of your rocks or coming off of the rock. There we go. And just dabbing your brush like this, you get this beautiful illusion of trees, these abstract illusion. I don't know if you can hear the kids across the street. They sound like we were having the best time ever. So good. Okay, so I've cleaned off my brush and dried it, and I'm going to bring in some more gold. I'm cleaning off my brush way more than normal. If I was using a larger size canvas, I probably wouldn't clean it at all because I would just keep working the paint out of the brush onto the canvas. Because it's so small, I keep needing to clean my brush. So I'm going to load it up with some gold, and then I'm going to connect to the top and just drag right down. And this is going to start catching all of the beautiful texture underneath and begin to blend this all together. And then you can do the same kind of dabbing and bring the gold down into the trees. And so here I would just keep going over this and doing dabbing and putting more gold and then some more white on my brush to lighten it up. Just trying to get paint all into this texture here. So I want to start lightening up this top portion here because it's farther in the background. So I'm going to take a little more gold and add in a little bit of silver. And do the same thing, connect my brush to the top and then just drag down. And adding the silver is going to desaturate the color just enough so that this top portion looks like it's farther away. I'm going to drag down right into the top of my falls. Really blend the background in. Then I'm going to take a little bit of white, and without cleaning my brush, I'm just going to work it right in. And then do the same thing, connect to the top of the canvas and just pull right down. And And adding a little more white onto my brush, working it in. I'm now going to do this right over top of all of the rocks. Begin to give them some beautiful highlights. And if you add too much white, you can just take your finger and kind of blend it into the rocks a little bit. Adding a little bit more at the top here. I just keep adding more and more and more until I like it. So once you find a place that you like your top, then just leave it. And if you want to redefine your trees, you can do that. If you want it to be a little more blended and abstract like this, you can do that. Your options are literally endless. I'm going to take a little bit of gold. Oops. So I've cleaned my brush and I'm going to load it up with some gold and just work it right into the brush. And then I'm going to test it out to make sure there's not too much. I'm going to go right over top of the rocks and give them some beautiful golden highlights. Oops. Bring in a little more gold. Add some beautiful highlights onto these rocks. Beautiful. And then taking a little more gold, adding some highlights across this little bottom portion. And you really can't get enough gold, so I'm going to put some more right across the texture on the top here. And for this whole top portion, I'm just using downward brush strokes to give this really beautiful effect. And I'm going to bring in some gold highlights to give the illusion of light hitting trees up here. So I'm putting a little bit of gold on my brush. And then I'm just going to dab right along where there would be trees at the top here. Right where the sun would be hitting the trees and casting a little highlight. You can also do a scrubbing motion if you have like a really harsh line between the dark and the light. You can kind of do this little scrubbing motion to begin to blend it in a little bit more. Beautiful secret forest up here above the waterfall. And then you can even do the same over top of the trees down below, or you can let them be a little bit darker. And my brush is still a bit dirty, but I'm going to begin going right beside these rocks here to blend in the rock and the water. I'm just going right beside the rocks and pulling down. And then we can add another coat across the water if you think that you need a little more paint and coverage down here. So I'm going to clean my brush and bring in some ultramarine blue and just literally do the exact same thing that we did before. So connecting your ultramarine blue right below your rocks and then just going in a horizontal brush stroke. And then bringing in a little bit of bright aqua green and begin to blend. And so the thing with making beautiful water, when you blend these two colors, it's almost easier to blend less. So the less you disturb the paint, it almost makes a more of a watery effect. So I'm not going to go crazy and keep blending and blending and blending. I'm just really kind of lightly putting the color in and then letting it sit. You can kind of see it starting to make these little lines across the water. And then adding in a little bit of white the closer you get to your beach area here. So here, if you've covered any of your rocks, you can redefine them now. Taking a smaller brush and whatever color you want to make them. So I'm gonna go with some brown and gray and just kind of redefine them here. Especially if they got all covered up. And then also at the base of this rock here, just to flatten my horizon line, the water line, just going to bring some darker colors underneath this rock. So just a little bit of gray and brown. And if you wanted to bring some black in, you can put just little tiny black highlights all underneath the rocks to really kind of define them. I think I'm just going to leave it like that though. Beautiful. All right. Let's put some more water in. So taking the same brush, a flat top brush, we're going to go back over top of the falls. So making sure your brush is clean and then work some white paint into it. And then connect your brush and pull straight down. I always make my waterfalls kind of flat at the top. You can totally make them curve as well. Kind of like a bowl. And then just pulling right down. So making sure you have just a small amount of white on your brush, you can begin to go right underneath where the falls are hitting the water and bring some mist up by just dabbing your brush. And so I'm going to put more paint closer to the bottom and then dab upwards. Or you can use that same kind of scrubbing motion and scrub upwards depending on the size of your canvas. I'm going to go right up into my rocks and kind of lighten all of the rock area up. I just have a very small amount of white on my brush. And this is also how I love to make things look really mystical, to just do a little light scrub of white on top. So it's a very small amount of paint, but it just kind of gives that mystical feeling. So I'm going to lighten up my whole painting. So I'm going to take a clean brush and load it up with white and connect the top of my painting and pull down and begin to just lighten it all up a little bit. I'm going to pull down pretty much right over the whole top portion. I'm going to do a little bit of scrubbing up into here to just blend the white in. And then taking a little more white and going right over top of where the water meets the edge. Just to blend those two colors in really nicely. And then taking your palette knife, we're going to add some little white highlights. So making a little slice into your white, so you have a tiny little roll of white on the edge of your palette knife, and go right underneath of your rocks to bring in some little highlights. And then you can also add a tiny little white highlight right on the edge of your shoreline here as well. So taking a smaller brush with kind of a more round top, get a little bit of Hooker's green, and we're gonna mix in a little bit of gold. So actually I would say, like, if I had to put a percentage on it, like 10% green and 90% gold. So we get this like green tinted gold color. And we're going to go back across where the top of the trees would be. And this is going to bring in a little bit of warmth into our painting and a little more color. I just love this light green color. You can also take this same color and go over portions of your rock to bring in kind of a mossy look. So these rocks are covered in moss. A little green, a little gold. Make this kind of mossy look on top of these rocks. And then anywhere that you have some trees down here. And even working it up into the falls a little bit. So there's so many layers going on here. Like the waterfall, we're gonna go over the, like, creating the white in here. And how many times have we done it? Twice, and so we're gonna do it once more. So just adding more and more layers, adding more and more color, and bring in a little more warm green on these rocks here. Give them some highlight. The little warm green. Green and gold. I'm going to take in a little bit more, I'm going to take a little more green just straight up and go back over top of my trees here because they kind of got a little muddy. I'm just going to bring in a little more color again. There we go. So let's go over top of our water one more time, and then I would say we are complete. So I'm going to take a smaller brush. Let's see which brush here. I'm going to take like a smaller flat top brush and connect to the top of the water and just pull straight down. And there we go. I hope you love painting your beautiful tropical waterfall. Have an amazing day. So much love to you. Mwah. And if you want to bring in any little stray pieces of water, seeing where the water falls over the rocks and carry it right down.
Yeah.
Add in some more little water falls here. And say hi to Jude.
Hi.
Are you filming me?
Yeah.